very sensitive, so bear with me as I adjust. We will enter into our work session at this time, and we are going to discuss boundary changes. And I'm going to turn that over to Dr. Vanderpool.
I'm really nervous to hit this one. All right, well, thank you all for allowing Mr. Delaney and I to join you tonight to talk about some projections and proposed boundary changes for the 1920 school year. We are going to be focusing on two buildings, Warren Elementary and Fairmont, which have been stressed the past few years with increased enrollment. So we have a committee, capacity committee in the district made up of Mark, myself, facilities director, who was Jeremy, of course, and then Zach Bright, who helps us compile all our data. This committee has been in place for probably 10 years or more, and has had different directors looking at the options. Overall, the district's had stable enrollment. We have specific building capacity concerns. Part of those concerns exist because of previous soft boundary changes that have made, and that's why we see the stress at Fairmont. We also see a little bit of the stress at Warren from previous soft boundary changes, but most of Warren's concerns come from just new housings and people moving into the area. And of course, we're here to talk about those two buildings. So we want to go over a little bit of the history, and so looking back at historical enrollment numbers. Again, the district's enrollment as a whole is stable, but we'll see that Fairmont and Warren have had pretty significant increases the past 3 or 4 years. The buildings are getting very creative with space, but I think it would be fair to say that they don't have any classrooms right now. If they needed to open up to 4th grade or to 3rd grade, they would probably have to look at some alternative options. And as of today, this is what we're looking at for enrollment moving forward. I do want to note that we do have an update. So this enrollment was pulled on 8/22, but we had an update last week, which does not change Warren or Fairmont, but it does change Henderson. And Henderson is going to start experiencing they're already tight at Henderson, but they're going to be our next to review and look at. Again, it's all soft boundary changes, moves from Harvest Ridge to Henderson, Henderson to Fairmont, that kind of put us in the predicament. But we're going to have to start taking a close look at Henderson, and I believe there was some very high kindergarten class this year at Henderson.
At Henderson, yes. We had a little bit larger than expected incoming kindergarten class than what we projected.
And so these numbers do not reflect what we could see moving forward. So when we met, and we spent a lot of time as a group going through the district talking about the previous trends, we really wanted to do what we could to create some long-term solutions. The soft boundary process, and I'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute, is what we've used in the past, and it is a slow and gradual transition. So we don't have 200 students moving from one building to the other in 1 year. Usually it's about 50% or so, it seems like, in the first year, and then it's kind of a gradual build-up. So we want to move students to buildings with space, align students into a cleaner feeder system. So we'll be talking about some secondary adjustments as we get to the end of the presentation. And we want to allow for growth in the Cottleville area. We saw a news article today that talked about growth in O'Fallon, and the picture was the houses on end. And we know that just enough dirt could put 400, 500, 600 homes in that area, the floodplain that's down there, and that's what they're doing now is some cool. So soft boundary process, if you haven't heard of this before, I think it's kind of unique to us, but what it does is it allows students who are currently attending, say Warren, they're kindergarten today at Warren Elementary, they'll be allowed to finish at Warren Elementary. They'll be provided transportation for the next few years. Their siblings may be allowed to continue to attend also, even if they're not at the school, but transportation would end after about 5 years. In the past, I know Mr. Sloan reviewed because there was some concern about costs moving through those neighborhoods, but because they joined the district or the boundaries for the building, it didn't seem like it was an issue with funding. So we'd be using the soft boundary process. Students would be able to stay in the building until they finish. Incoming kidney partners and transfer students would be the ones that would be moving. And then there'd be a few students that would be opting to go to their new school. So Warren recommendations using the soft boundary process starting in the 1920 school year affects the subdivision southwest of the Page extension. When the boundaries were created years ago, Page was a drawing, it wasn't even in place. So when we start to look at the current boundaries and the new boundaries, you'll see some of that, some kind of odd move around that road. And in considerations, enrollment predictions are made based on current students, subdivisions moving are established, and space is limited for new homes. So we know that we're not going to get a 250 subdivision in any of the areas that we're looking at. John Weldon will receive approximately 95 students. This number is based on current students attending Warren that would be in John Weldon's boundary areas. And then the same for Independence, 95 students. This number has fluctuated. If we looked at it today, there might be 2 or 3 at more at John Weldon or Warren. When we looked at this 3 or 4 weeks ago, it was 89 and 95. So, but I think we're talking about a little under 200 students would eventually move out of Warren. And so here are the pictures. And so you'll notice that we got a Highway 364 there. The green area is current Warren attendance area. And then the red outline is John Weldon. Would move to John Weldon. Yellow would move to Independence, and then the purple is all Independence. So again, we have about 95 students in both those areas currently.
Well, yeah, a little hard to read on the map, but inside that yellow, it indicates about 95 kids that are at Warren right now, that are K-5, that would move on to Independence if they chose to.
Any questions about that?
With using Page as part of the boundary, we're not splitting any subdivisions.
Or not?
Thank you.
That's one of the reasons why we looked at it. So Fairmont recommendations, again, starting in the 1920 school year, affect subdivisions from Whitehurst Manor to Harvester Road. And we'll have some drawings up there so that people can see that. And then considerations, predictions based on current students, subdivisions moving are established, and Central will receive approximately 84 students over the next 2 years. Fairmont was much more difficult. And a big part of that is because of the Park Charles subdivision. So Fairmont, if we go to the north, is Henderson. Well, Henderson doesn't have room, and we just moved students from Henderson to Fairmont, so we can't go that direction. There's a little spot way up here in the west corner that is Warren. We can't push students from Fairmont to Warren. And so really the only good option we have right now is Central Elementary, unless we decide to do something where we're going to cross over, and this is all Cosley right now. So what we were looking at is the subdivisions in here. We do have some concerns for Fairmont. You can see there's a large open space here. I believe this is the old driving range. Mm-hmm. And then right off the map up here is some new homes that are going in. And we know that's going to have some impact on Fairmont. So any questions about that before we move forward? So some additional adjustments, and I believe some of the board is aware that we've got some students that may attend an elementary school for 6 years, and all of a sudden they go to middle school and they're with a whole crop of kids that they don't know, because there's 140 students in that fifth grade class, and 10 of them happen to go to Barnwell, and the rest of them go to Bryan. So as we made these changes, we really looked closely at the secondary feeder systems to try to keep the kids in a cohort. And so right now, this is the secondary boundaries for the Warren. This kind of purple, red-ish is the Francis Howell Middle overlay. And then up here in orange, so this is kind of way up in the corner, the top middle there, is St. Joe. So we've got Francis Howell Middle boundaries go right behind St. Joseph's. And what we would be looking at would be taking the boundary changes that we're looking at making and pushing everything south of 364, moving that to Francis Howell Middle and Francis Howell High School. And then everything to the north would become Sager and Central. So the students would have a clear cohort group that they would go to school with. Right now, this is really kind of a switch, because we've got kids, some of them go to Howell, some of them go to Central, even if it says Howell in this. So there wouldn't be any loss to either of the high schools. It would be just a switch, because as an example, there's a subdivision, and there's some people right here. This is actually my subdivision, and it's one of a handful in this area that gets to pick between the middle schools and high schools they attend, because buses have gone through there, and that's just been the system they've used. And so what we'd like to do is really kind of make this subdivision goes to middle like we have in the rest of the district. And I think that having all the kids go to Independence would help to clean that up. So any questions about those moves? And then this is the moves that we would be proposing for Fairmont. Now, all of the students that are in this area, this Jungerman Harvester area right here that we're looking at moving to Central, all go to Hollenbeck. Because Hollenbeck is pretty much from here north to pretty much 70 is the boundaries. And so what we would be looking at, if we were to make an adjustment, the purple is Francis Howell Central, and then the rest is Francis Howell North. The area that we're proposing to move is split between the two high schools. And this is Central's boundary currently. So if we didn't propose a move from north to Central, we would have a group of kids that would go to Francis Howell Central together, go to Hollenbeck together, but then when they go to high school, they would be separated from that class. And it's right now about 23 students, and so what we were looking at doing is pushing those to Central just to keep them together with their cohort. We hear from families where there's some little pockets in the district where they have concerns when that happens, so we're trying to eliminate that as we move forward with boundary changes.
So the potential of doing that really cleans this area up, and it gives kids an opportunity to stick together K-12 and not be bounced around and chopped around between going to one middle school and then back to a different high school with a smaller cohort of kids. So I think in the long run, it's probably beneficial for those kids.
So then our final slide here is just our timeline, and really we're here to get your input and thoughts. We're just reporting to you tonight. In the fall, we'd like to send letters to all affected homes. We understand that there are families that may not have kids going to school yet. There's grandparents that may have their grandchildren move in, so we want to make sure that everyone knows about the change. And then we would have some type of a comment period, and Mr. Delaney and I would work with the buildings to schedule some nights where families could come up and ask questions. And we'd hold open houses. This was popular at some of the other schools where they did this, where we've had boundary changes, and I think help to convince families to maybe move sooner than later when they get to know the new school. And then we would like to survey families now in the fall to figure out who may be wanting to move for next year, so that we can have some numbers that would help us for staffing. But also because we've never really tracked this over time. So my 50% number earlier, the number of families we would expect to move, is just a kind of a guess from what we've heard. We really don't have clear, accurate numbers. So for the next few years, what we would plan on doing is we would start with the survey to figure out who plans to go, so we know what that first push looks like, and then we would move forward over the next few years, asking our BISs to track that number so that we have some accurate information. Is it 50%, is it 60, is it 30? So that as we make soft boundary changes in the future, we have some reference points.
Board, any questions? Mr. Hayden?
I guess the first thing I have is I want to thank you guys for the thought that you guys put in it. So it seems like this was much more comprehensive and thought out than some of the previous boundary changes and adjustments we did where we've isolated pockets and stuff. I guess the main thing that I have is we know that moving these kids to these other schools will make the school a better learning place, a better working place. So why soft boundaries? Why don't we go ahead and do it and make it a better learning environment for all the kids, and they'll be in schools with their friends and everything else instead of a soft boundary. I understand that it may not be costing us a lot more, but we're still adding probably 5 to 10 minutes on every one of those bus routes in order to accommodate these soft boundary changes. So if we know it's better for kids, we know it's better for our teachers, we know it's better for our staff to have these numbers better balanced, why wouldn't we just go ahead and do it?
I think one of the reasons would be that we have had kids in these schools for several years. They're accustomed to their teachers, they're accustomed to the environment, and I don't necessarily think that pulling a third grader to a new school is best for that kid. So I think those are good decisions for our families to make. And it's not that we couldn't do hard boundaries, certainly districts do hard boundaries all the time. I think it's just one of the considerations that has been put in place is just that transition, forcing kids to transition to another school.
Ms.
So I have a question.
Go ahead.
We've got the section on the website where real estate agents can go and find out what school a home is in. But with the soft boundary changes, I think that throws that off. I know that Tanglewood had a lot of issues when the soft boundary change happened from Henderson to Fairmont because people that didn't have kids did not pay attention to the letter. And so then they put the house on the market and it's marketed as one school when in fact it's really something else. So I've got a little bit of concern about that. And then my other question is the facilities, the architect that's looking at the overall facilities and things, is this something that they were going to look at as well with the actual boundaries and where do we need new buildings if we need them?
Michelle, we won't be asking the architect to look at the boundaries, but they are taking a look at capacity and how they could address capacity at all of the buildings. So we know that, Will has already mentioned that Warren really doesn't have any available space, and so we're taking a look at where would we place a classroom addition if that was a decision that the board would decide to make. So they're really approaching it from kind of agnostic in terms of attendance areas, but more that for every facility that we have, if you needed to expand capacity in terms of physical plant, how would that look and where would that go?
Michelle, the other thing that we had discussed as a team was reaching out to local realtors or realtor association. We still had to put our head together on how that was going to look. But we had heard that similar concern from before, that sometimes realtors weren't sure which school kids were pocketed to be in, and we wanted to get ahead of that early if this decision is approved, and also reach out to different realtors and different groups that sell homes in the area to make sure that they're aware so that families are communicated with prior to purchasing a house or what those options might look like.
I think we could also flip it in the database and make it that the software we're going to would be what's reflected in the database. So families that are already established know that they've been grandfathered in for a period of time, but new families who might be looking things up in the database would see the new school instead. So that would have actually solved our Tanglewood problem.
So maybe it's not necessarily a soft boundary change as much as it is a boundary change, but we're grandfathering people. It might not be as confusing.
I think that is pretty much what soft boundary is.
That's what it is.
Okay, Mrs. Lang?
Well, that was part of my question about, do we have a game plan? So we're only seeing 85 children from Fairmont? Did I read that correctly? Move?
Yes, that's correct, and I think if we, will continue to study Fairmont to see if we can make some adjustments to some other boundaries for that area. Obviously, they're very large. I think the challenge with Fairmont is we've just done boundaries that have really pushed kids that way. I'm not sure if this is the right time to then push them all back the opposite direction. And with that border touching, Warren at that one side, I don't know that we can't push kids that direction either.
We did explore some different options for Fairmont, but what we realized it would involve multiple schools. So we would have to look at pushing students from Fairmont to Central, moving Central students to Cosley students possibly to Beck. And it was such a major change that we thought that, what we're doing here is relatively clean. A couple of subdivisions going in one direction or another, but that would require a lot more people involved and input, because we may have to do something that is more of a hard boundary change where the next year everyone goes for 5 or 6 buildings. And so that's one of the reasons why we haven't looked at those other options.
And I do think the board needs to think of this as a first step, so, and having conversations with those in this group. Definitely, this isn't like the beginning and the end of the changes, so have certainly considered what we will be discussing in future in other schools, because this is not gonna solve our space problems right now. It's just gonna help us get in that direction, but we have some other things we're gonna have to move forward.
Kevin, I have a question on cost. Transportation, you said it was minimal. It would just, I don't know, it would seem like having 2 different schools go into a subdivision, there'd be an increased cost in transportation for us.
Well, remember that we pay for a route, and so we can adjust the routes to pick the kids up, so that we usually don't add a lot of routes, so it doesn't add a lot of cost. To Mr. Haynes' point, it's probably more time that gets impacted. So an existing route now has a few minutes added to it, and it goes into a subdivision that it didn't used to pick up some kids who are being grandfathered to take them to the school, or actually, I guess it would be the other way, take the kids to their new location. So the routes in existence, we're already paying for it. It's more a question of time the length of the total bus ride might increase.
And what would that
For the
length-
most part. There
What would
may
that length be? Like 5 to 10 minutes more?
Typically, yes.
I think in some cases it would even be less,
Yeah,
and I'm thinking of your subdivision.
yeah. I think the subdivisions we're looking at are, off of major roadways in the area. They typically have one road going through them. So it shouldn't be a big impact on transportation. And they already have buses going across the street to the same school in a lot of cases, so it's just them looping up through and picking up kids. But I could see, like in my subdivision, it being another 5 or 10 minutes, but it just depends on how many kids opt in. If 65 students in my subdivision right now attend that Warren, it's probably the biggest of the group. And if everyone decided, they're not, but if everyone did, I could see it taking more time. But that's not what we're used to.
Right.
Okay, so we're coming up onto our posted time for our tax rate hearing, so I'm gonna ask the board if you have additional questions to please email those in. We are going to head on up to the dais as we get ready for the tax rate hearing. Thank you.
Can I just say one more thing?
Yes.
Mark and Will do not have this in their job description. This is falling into the other tasks as assigned. And I, again, just want to express my appreciation. They have been working on this for a very long time. We've been having lots of conversations, and I can assure you this is thoughtful work, and not something that they whipped up in a day. They have been very thoughtful about what they're doing. So I appreciate their work on this, as well as Jeremy. So,
Thank you both very much.
I want you to grab me, Mary.
Who's gonna grab Michelle?
Who's gonna grab, she just sat beside that, who's gonna grab her?
Is that Sandy Ferguson?
Yes.
Oh,
She's
With it being 7 o'clock, the district is conducting a public hearing on the 2018 tax rate to allow citizens time to be heard on the proposed property tax rates to be set by the Board of Education for the Prince Health School District R3 School District. Mr. Supple.
Thank you, Mrs. Coe. I want to first share with the board this evening some information about how our assessed valuation has changed. And this slide can show you a comparison between last year's assessed value and this year's assessed value. This is a non-reassessment year, so the growth in our assessed valuation comes as a result of new construction that's been added to the tax rolls. And the overall growth is at about 2%, as you can see on the slide. That's fairly consistent with what happens in a non-reassessment year, although it's a little bit less than what we've seen in prior non-reassessment cycles. Prior to 2009, that amount would have been probably closer to 3% in terms of the growth in assessed valuation. And this is just a breakdown of our assessed valuation by category. No surprise to any of us, I think. We continue to be primarily a residential community, so 72% of our assessed value comes from residential properties. We have just about 12% that is commercial property, a very small percentage of agricultural in terms of our overall personal property, cars, boats, trailers, those types of motorcycles, those types of vehicles and so forth, about a little over 15%. And then we do get some state-assessed property, railroads and utilities, for which we get to collect some revenue, and that is just about a 0.5%. And this just shows the history of our assessed values and how it has changed over time. A couple things that I would point out is that, as I was sharing earlier, you can see that in 2005 and 2007, even in 2009, those which would have been non-reassessment years, you can see that the change in assessed value was closer to that 3% mark. Of course, again, prior to the recession, we had double-digit increases in reassessment years, and then we had that period of time during the recession when we actually lost value in our total assessed valuation. We've recovered now. We're above where we were in 2009, so that's a great thing. But our level of growth is still, while it's great, it's not where it was prior to 2009. And there are probably a whole series of reasons for that, including the fact that we're getting to be a more mature community, so there's less opportunity for significant growth just because a lot of the property is already built out. This is our proposed tax rate for the year, and the next slide will show you a comparison of this year to last. And so you can see that our assessed, because of the change in assessed value and some other factors that we talked about with the board in work session at our last meeting, our rate is increasing just very, very slightly. It was $4.85.27 for the 2017-18 year, and for 2018-19, it would be $4.85.75. So a very small increase in our projected rate. And just how this has changed over the course. So again, we're showing first of all the what it was for this year. When we did the projected tax liability notice in April, based on the assessed valuation numbers that we had at the time, we thought we might actually reduce our tax rate just very, very slightly. But at the workshop, I shared with you that it's changed about 0.1%, and that's where we are tonight with our hearing and what's being recommended to the board later this evening. This is a comparison of our St. Charles County school districts. And you can see that the shift in our tax rate is very similar to what has happened in the other districts across the area. So Zumwalt's change in its tax rate matches ours exactly. Wentzville's is a little bit less. And then St. Charles and Orchards Farm are both just a little bit more than ours, but very, very minor changes in tax rates, again, as a result of this being a non-reassessment year. And I would point out that Francis Howe does have the second lowest tax rate in St. Charles County. This is just a graphic representation of the tax rate over time, how things have changed. A lot of the ups and downs have to do with the rollbacks that are required as a result of the Hancock Amendment. And then at various points in time, like in 2004, there was an increase in the tax rate that was approved by the voters. And then our tax rate actually changed a little bit as we went through the recessionary period because in order to generate the same level of revenue on a lower amount of assessed valuation, we had to increase our tax rate a little bit. This is just a reminder because we're getting further and further away from when it actually happened, but I do like to remind the community that the red bars indicate the 6 years and 7 years during which the board actually voluntarily reduced its tax rate over what they were allowed to collect. So there were 6 years when there was about 25 cents per year that was not levied, and then there was, in 2011, there was a nickel that was not levied. So just a reminder, again, we're getting further and further from when that actually happened, but it is an important part of our history. We do need to show you how this tax rate relates to what has been budgeted. And so you can see that we expect to generate about $123.5 million in tax revenue based on this rate, and we have budgeted $124.2 million. So we always see, we use a factor. We don't always project that we're going to collect 100%. We project we'll get very close to 100%, but not 100%. But our collections usually come in a little bit better than we expect. So this, I think, is an appropriate rate and will certainly, I think, meet our revenue target. We also need to provide information to the community about how new construction and reassessment impacts the revenue that the district receives. There's a calculation that we need to do, and this shows that the revenue from new construction improvements is just under 1%, and this year, because it's a non-reassessment year, there's no new revenue as a result of reassessment. So that 2% increase in our assessed value is driving some additional revenue to the district, but it's less than 1%. This is a history of our new construction totals. Again, you can see that there was a period of time in 2008, just before the recession, where we had very robust new construction. And it's varied over time. I'm happy to say that it's a little bit higher. We're now at $22 million of new construction, but it's still below the level that we've seen previously. New construction is great because it expands our tax base. Those are properties or vehicles that have not been on the tax rolls previously. And so it expands the tax base, which helps to lessen the burden on existing property owners. A good news story here is that our state aid is beginning to increase. You can see that just prior to the adoption of the new formula in fiscal year 2006, we kind of hit our low point in terms of state aid, and you can see how it had been declining. We did begin to increase as that new formula was implemented. Then it leveled off for a while and actually dropped as the state was not able to fully fund the formula during those recessionary years. But now our state aid is beginning to climb again, which is a good story. Vicky, can you help me there? Sorry. Thanks. So the important piece to take away, though, is that what we're looking at on that previous slide is our state aid in terms of total dollars. This slide shows the representation of state aid as a percentage of our total operating revenue. So I would say, 10 years ago, state aid was almost 26% of our total revenue, and now it's 24%. So we're very, very happy that our state aid, in terms of total dollars, is increasing, but it remains relatively stable in terms of a percentage of the total revenue that we receive. And you can see that the difference is really being picked up by local, because that's where the growth is. The county and federal are relatively stable as well. So even though we're seeing an increase in total dollars from the state, as a percentage of our operating revenue, we haven't seen a significant growth. I do like to remind people that there is a tax credit program available for senior citizens and some individuals who are 100% disabled. They do get a credit for the real estate taxes or the rent that they have paid. There's information available at the Department of Revenue. This information is posted to the district's board docs site, and the web address is available there for anybody who might be interested in finding out whether they are eligible for that tax credit or not. So just in summary, this is a non-reassessment year. Our assessed values are about $187 million higher than they were in 2009. Our new construction assessed valuation has increased by almost $6 million compared to the prior year. The growth in our revenue is really limited by the Hancock Amendment, so we don't see a one-for-one growth in terms of that. And our proposed tax rate for the coming year is $4.85.75. And Mrs. Cope, that is my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Supple. Board, are there any questions?
Or I don't know if any of the community members have questions.
Or from the community? Thank you.
Thank you,
very
Mrs.
much,
Cope.
Mr. Supple. With it being 10 after 7, I call the Francis Miles School District Board of Education meeting to order. Our pledge this evening is going to be led by our National AP Scholars. They're coming. Oh, they're coming in, okay. If you could repeat that. So would our National AP Scholars join us at the podium and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Board, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Lang, seconded by Mr. Lang. By roll call.
Ms. Walker,
Aye.
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 Motion carries 7-0. We have a virtual column, 6 virtuals. Next on our agenda, we have recognitions. Mr. Dykeman.
Thank you, Mrs. Cope. This year, 266 students, the most in district history, were named Advanced Placement or AP Scholars for the 2017-18 school year. The AP program recognizes high school students who have demonstrated outstanding college-level achievement through AP courses and exams with the prestigious AP Scholars Awards. There are 4 different levels of the AP award that students can achieve: AP Scholar with Honor, AP Scholar with Distinction, and the highest award, National AP Scholar. To be named a National AP Scholar, a student must score at least a 4 out of 5 on all AP exams taken and scores a 4 or higher on 8 or more of those exams. That's a lot of AP tests. The district had 12 National AP Scholars, and while most were seniors who are now attending prestigious universities, Several who were juniors last year are here with us tonight because the only thing tougher than being a senior AP National Scholar is being a junior National AP Scholar. From Francis Howell High School, David Yang. From Francis Howell Central, Rashith Mishra and Michael Yu. And from Francis Howell North, Riley Lawson. Come on up in front of the guys and get pictures.
Janet, can you scoot in towards Chad?
Act like you like it.
There we go.
She wants one, she
Got
just
one
didn't
more.
have one there.
Our National AP Scholar. Three of our young scientists, Rashith Mishra from Francis Howell Central, David Yang from Francis Howell High School, and Shika Anim from Francis Howell North, successfully completed the Students and Teachers as Research Scientists program, or STARS, at UMSL over the summer. STARS pairs talented students with scientist mentors in a variety of fields to conduct intensive research. Rashith's university-level research paper was titled Differences in Neurobehavior Between Preterm and Full-Term Infants, and David researched Evaluating Mineral Properties of Microbial Sulfate Reduction in Santa Monica Basin Sediments. Here tonight, so these are our STARS scientists, ladies and gentlemen.
Guys, can you scoot up right
Okay.
there? There's some people
The
behind you.
president is short.
You guys can scoot just a little bit out. There we go. Thank you.
Our STARS scientists. And here tonight with an additional recognition for David is STARS Program Director, Dr. Ken Mayers. Ken?
Thank you very much. Let me supplement a little bit what was said previously. Before recognizing three outstanding Francis Howell School District students, I'd like to tell you something about the 2018 STARS program. The STARS program enables outstanding rising senior students who show significant promise in science to attend an area research institution for 6 weeks. These students conduct research with outstanding faculty in a one-to-one environment. Classes and research are conducted using the facilities of the Cortex Innovation Community, the Donald Danforth Plant Science Center, St. Louis University, Washington University, and the host institution, the University of Missouri St. Louis. In addition to our winner, we had two outstanding students from the Francis Howell District who participated in this summer's program. On July 20th, they presented their research findings to an audience of their peers, research scientists, parents, and friends. And having successfully completed the requirements for graduation from the program, they were presented with their laboratory coats, their STARS pin, graduation certificate, and were commended Stars Research Scholars in the ceremony at the Desley Theater of the University of Missouri St. Louis. The students are Shika Anand and Rashid Mishra. So congratulations to those students. Academically, the participants were a very select group. I don't remember so many qualified applicants for the STARS program. All student research papers, I think we have a copy of David's. All student research papers were reviewed and judged anonymously using the following criteria: difficulty and complexities of the research, the appropriateness of the research methodology, findings, quality of writing, and overall quality of the research project. And in addition, reviewers assigned points to 8 critical components of a research paper in order to quantify the evaluation assessment. And it's with great pride and pleasure that I'm here this evening to present the STARS Award for Excellence in Research to an outstanding Francis High School District student, David Yang. The award reads as follows: students and teachers as research scientists, in recognition of outstanding research accomplishments during the STARS program, the Partnership of Research Institutions presents this award of excellence to David Yang. And it's signed by the senior officers of the participating institution. Congratulations, David. Things don't happen in a vacuum. Lastly, I'd like to congratulate the Francis Howell School District faculty and staff for the outstanding academic programs that provide the quality background that helps students like David to win very, very competitive awards. Thank you very much.
When Barnwell Middle School nurse Christy Hillner showed up for work on August 23rd, she expected it to be business as usual. Little did she know that her life-saving skills would soon be put to the test. As students gathered in the cafeteria for lunch, Eric Hazelwood, a food service vendor, was making his regular delivery. Without warning, he collapsed from a sudden cardiac arrest. Administrators immediately called 911 and Christy sprang into action, relying on her years of training. When she arrived at the cafeteria, she quickly began administering CPR while instructing someone to bring the school's AED. Christy, would you come up, please?
She loves to be the center of attention.
Good, then you'll like this spotlight. Christy delivered shocks with the AED, and within minutes, paramedics from the St. Charles County Ambulance District arrived along with Central County Fire and Rescue, who then initiated cardio-cerebral resuscitation protocols. Nurse Hillner was first on the scene to assist Mr. Hazelwood, and it was the efforts of all involved that helped save his life. Less than 24 hours after the event, Mr. Hazelwood was awake and interacting with his family and friends in the hospital. Barnwell Middle School nurse Christy Hillner.
It'll be over in a minute. I told her it did. That's right, it'll be a minute. I think.
Thank you, Christy, for all you do. Thank you, Mrs. Cope.
Sunny, would you like to introduce the student?
Sure. Miss, before you leave, take a look over here. Ma'am, remember this face and save me too, please. Please, please, please. It's my honor to introduce the student board representative this tonight. I'd like to ask Mr. Rashid Mishra to please come join me. As a principal, I'd love to see so many educators in the room. It's our joy to have kids come into our schools that love education, that truly, truly want to challenge themselves. Even on top of that, are better people than they are students. Rashid is that. And as a principal, it's one of my best, favorite things to do is see the joy of teachers interacting with Rashid. He's a young man that gets involved in his own education. He's owned it. Just to kind of give you a little understanding of that, you heard he's a national AP scholar. He's taking almost every AP class we offer, and he's going to go to college with over 40 college credits when he arrives on campus. That's a year and a half, almost 2 years of college. It's incredible. And it's not just, a lot of times we get young people that are really, this is my thing, and they attack that subject. He really is kind of a Renaissance young man. He took AP Chem, AP Spanish, AP Economics, AP Lang, AP Lit, AP Psych, AP Calc, AP Psych Physics 2, and AP Spanish, AP Art History. He's taken the whole spectrum of challenging courses, and I love it because one of my favorite things is to see these young people make a high school campus a college campus. They really attack what they want to do, and he's done that. Not only in school, he's also done many things outside of the classroom. His AP score is near perfect. He broke the 4.0 scale, got a 4.72. He'll be in the 4.0 luncheon for sure. A couple years on speech and debate, NHS, Scholar Quiz Bowl, FBLA. He volunteers at Missouri Baptist Hospital. He plays cricket since he was 7. He's the captain of his cricket team. He's in the STARS program. Participated in Wash U's mini medical school, their years 1, 2, and 3. He takes part in numerous tutoring opportunities at the high school. Just really an outstanding young man. He's got his colleges narrowed down. He wants to do a pre-med. He's looking at biochemistry down to Mizzou, Wash U, SLU, UMKC. His mother is awesome. If you'd like to stand up, please. Give her a big round of applause. I'm so excited you have another young one coming to Central. She is a teacher at Maryville, teaches chemistry there, so you know where he gets a lot of his intelligence. So it runs in the family. Really an outstanding young man. It's exciting to have him be the board rep tonight, and I can't wait for you to ask him lots of questions, and you'll get a lot of neat responses. So please welcome Mr. Rashid Mishra.
Blinded by all those lights.
There's 3 or 4. Right now? Okay. Mom, can you get the picture?
Yes.
Oh, look at how excited you are. You can stand in.
Come on, Mom. Come on over here.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Thank you, Dr. Arnell, for a great presentation. Welcome our student rep with us this evening. Rashid, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And you hit your button to turn to be able to speak. There we go. That way everybody can hear you. So welcome to the dais with us. Feel free to participate in our meeting and ask questions tonight if you have any questions. The only thing you don't get to do is vote. Fair enough?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Thank you for joining us. All right,
right, next on our agenda is patron comments. During our patron comments, patrons are invited to address the Board of Education. Please come to the podium so everyone can hear. Please adhere to the 3-minute time limit. The board is interested in hearing the public's concerns and opinions, but we do not answer patrons' questions during our meeting. Questions and concerns will be addressed by Dr. Mary Hendricks Harris and other appropriate staff members. Please remember that comments about individual students and staff are not allowed due to confidentiality. These concerns need to be brought to the administration's attention and may be brought to the board in closed session. So with that, first we have Miss Becky Strickland.
Good evening. My name is Becky Strickland. I'm a teacher at Helm Middle School. On August 30th of this year, I received an email that started like this. You are truly an amazing teacher and deserve to know that. I've never met a teacher who made me feel so special, who made me realize that I'm better at English than I thought, who listened to me even when you didn't have to. Every teacher I know has that folder somewhere with these kinds of notes. We keep them, every one of them. They keep us going when the expectations and realities of teaching weigh heavy. I needed that email on August 30th. Because on August 29th, I received an email from our superintendent's account. Upon reading the subject line, I realized this was not the welcome back to school message from years past. Instead, less than 3 weeks into a new school year, I was being chastised by someone, and I'm still not sure who wrote the message, who didn't even bother to sign the email. It began, earlier this year, the Board of Education and FHEA were unable to come to an agreement on the salary increase for our certified staff. As a result, some teachers are working to contract to express their displeasure. The email continued, touting the desire for our schools to be positive places for all employees to work, and then morphed into what felt like a thinly veiled threat, referencing Board Policy 4640. I had to walk away. I returned much later to this beginning of the school year message. I read it again, noting that in addition to no signature, there was no greeting, no personal information included at all. I read Policy 4640. I was struck by the directive to maintain a positive work environment and cooperative relationship with my coworkers, juxtaposed with the tone and message of this email. The first, and thus far only, all-employee email of the school year concluded with this. If any teacher has been subjected to inappropriate actions or comments, regardless of your stance on work to contract, please contact your building principal or the Human Resources Department. I didn't contact my building principal or HR, even though after reading this email, I felt demoralized, demeaned. Welcome back to school indeed. Teachers in this district and everywhere understand that if we speak to students or anyone in the manner that this email spoke to us, we will break the relationship. We understand that our words can and do last a lifetime. We have the notes to prove it. On August 29th, I wasn't sure I wanted to be a teacher anymore. August 30th reminded me why I am a teacher. Take a lesson from our students. Treat us like the highly educated professionals we are. Instead of sending emails meant to chastise teachers as if we were misbehaving children, acknowledge that we go above and beyond every day, that we are doing exactly what is expected of us when we work to contract. And most of all, please keep the dialogue open with FHEA. Help fix the relationship with the teachers of this district. Thank you.
I love my job. It's my calling and it's my passion. And I'm confident that anyone that knows me would agree with that. I also know many teachers that are just like me. We love our job. We first and foremost love the kids, and we provide them with so much more than academic skills. My students are important to me, and I am important to them. I give them my time, my care, and my guidance every school day. I give them as close to 100% as I'm capable of giving, and many days even more. But there are 2 other children that need my time, my care, and my guidance and my love every day. Those 2 kids call me mom. Being a mom is also my passion and my calling. I love being a mom. But I realized a while back that during the school year, my kids, the ones that call me mom, don't often get the best version of me from August through May. They get the frazzled, stressed out, overworked, exhausted mom. They don't always get all my patience and energy because I was spending 10 to 12 hours a day at school, going to extra meetings, volunteering on committees, going in earlier, staying late to finish the mountains of paperwork that accompany my job. It was a heartbreaking moment when I realized that those 2 incredible, amazing kids were getting cheated out of having a fully present mom. They deserve the best version of me too. So I decided to create a healthier work-home life balance. I quit the extras, the extra committees, meetings, and trainings. I stopped giving up my lunch and my planned time. I worked the hours I was contracted and paid for working, which according to some is apparently protesting. You know, my husband has a job. He works from 10 to 7. He arrives at his office at 10 and he leaves at 7. And not once has he or anyone he works with ever been accused of protesting for working exactly the hours he's contracted and paid for working. The line for job expectations for teachers has become so disturbingly blurred in our society. Somewhere along the way, it became expected for teachers to volunteer their time and money to our schools and classrooms. Volunteering shouldn't be expected. It should be a choice, and we shouldn't be made to feel guilty or like we care any less about students if we choose not to work 12-hour days or spend hundreds of dollars on our classrooms or attend meetings and trainings on days we aren't contracted to work. We've all heard the saying, you can't serve from an empty cup, but yet it feels like teachers are expected to. For many of us, that cup is at best cracked and at worst completely broken. And we are seeing the floods of its brokenness all across our country as teachers advocate for better funding for our schools, for better working wages and salaries, as we advocate for the necessary materials that funding, not teachers, should supply for their classrooms. And most importantly, as we advocate for our students, because at the end of the day, that is what we are doing. We are advocating for our students. It deeply saddens and frustrates me that anyone would insinuate that I'm anything less than a caring, dedicated, passionate teacher because I've chosen to create a healthy work-home life balance. Because what I've learned since I started this journey is that a healthy balance has made me a better mom and a better teacher. I am more focused, more present, more energetic, and more productive. Because I'm taking care of me, I am becoming the best version of myself. And isn't that what all the kids in my life deserve?
Good evening, my name is Ethan Ferguson. I'm in 6th grade at Barnwell Middle School. I'm a Boy Scout troop from Harvester Christian Church. I am working on my citizenship and community merit badge, and I've learned lots of interesting things about the history of St. Charles, and that's also the reason why I'm here. I want to thank my teachers, my principals, all my staffs, even my bus driver for making my transition to 6th grade. It took all of them to help me start the new school year and the new school. I want to say thank you to the Board of Adoption to give your time to make my school the best they can be. Thank you for making all the hard decisions for our adoption. Sometimes we forget to say thank you to people who work so hard for us. Thank you for all your hard work. I also want to thank the superintendents who oversee and leads our school director. Always listening to our community and keeping us safe and making us the best district we can be. Thank you for all the different administrators who work so hard and do the best for all the students in Francis Howell Middle School. This is what a community is, and I want to be the best I can be as a student and also as a person. I want to be a good citizen, and you are helping me do that. Thank you for caring about me.
Next we have FHEA. FISPA. SAA. Board, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as submitted.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Walker, seconded by Mr. Lang. By roll call.
Mrs. Lang?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 7-0. For next on our agenda is our best practice. We're going to take a look at biomedical science, the summer camp, and we'll have a presentation by Mr. Brothers.
Good evening. We are here tonight to talk about a brand new summer program we had last summer, our middle school biomedical summer camp. Really unique about it, it was a brainchild, if you will, from two students at Francis Howell North who developed it as part of their capstone project as part of our biomedical innovations course. When registration opened back in January for the camp, within 4 days we had all 120 spots filled, and we had a waiting list that was probably 60 deep. And if you were to take a look at the survey results, our parents and our students thought it was a great experience for our kiddos. This is Amy Ridland here. She is our secondary math and science content leader. Worked with the two students at Francis Howell North creating this course, and so she's going to talk to you a little bit more about the biomedical summer camp.
Does this work? Okay. The Biomedical Summer Camp from the Francis Howell this summer. It's a 1-week camp. It was created by two Francis Howell North seniors who completed 4 years of the biomedical PLTW program. Their goal was to create an experience for middle school students to gain exposure to the biomedical pathway. This was Michaela Erfling and Emily Fetch from Francis Howell North. They have both graduated and they are both now studying nursing at four-year universities. The campers experienced the life of a crime scene investigator for the week. They explored a crime scene, and through a variety of activities, they tried to determine the cause of the death of a victim. Some of these activities included blood typing, DNA extraction, and more. Students in the 4th course of Biomed, the Biomed pathway and also the engineering pathway complete a year-long independent research project where they partner with an industry professional. These girls decided to research and create a Biomed camp. They then had to present their research project to an IRB, an individual review board, where they gained feedback on their presentations. And then they, at the end of the school year, presented their feedback to a panel of industry biomed professionals, where they also gained feedback at the PLTW showcase. Our 4th course engineering students also went through that process with their independent research projects. Many of the highly engaging activities were modeled from the Intro Biomed course, which is called PBS, or Principles of Biomedical Sciences. We have a little video of the camp.
We wanted to make it really interactive. We didn't want them to come to a summer camp and be like, oh, I'm bored sitting in a desk all day. We wanted them to have activities that are hands-on. So we planned for most of the time that they're with us is they're up and doing an activity or moving around and never just sitting.
Even further than that, to give them the 21st century skills that they'll need to succeed in life.
And I was actually pretty interested in it because I really like forensic sciences, and we learned it in Spectra in Vermont.
It's really interesting. You learn a lot. It's not like stressful or anything either. It's pretty cool.
So this camp, we kind of went into a forensic basis. So the whole week, the first day, the students, they walk a crime scene. And as we progress through different activities throughout the week, they're going to end on the last day figuring out how the person died at the crime scene.
So we thought that would be fun because it's something that they can try to build out throughout the week. Different clues to change their mind, like, so they figured out how she died in the beginning and then they'll change it throughout the week. So we think it's just fun for them to come up with their own scenarios and their own reasonings on what happened.
We had a week last week and they really liked it, and then when they found out how the person died, they were just like, oh my gosh, because none of them really guessed it. It was really cool to see their reactions.
Yeah, it makes me feel like I'm actually working on the crime.
I like learning about the DNA, that's really cool, and how you can use it for forensics to learning like who committed a crime and stuff, and how you can use it to compare against other people and find out if two people are related based off like what's comparable between them.
We did one activity called gel electrophoresis, and you do that kind of stuff in high school too, and it's just using a lot of new equipment and new skills that you don't really know prior to it. So we feel like the camp really tried to help with that to prepare them on those skills and even using the equipment that they'll use in high school.
Emily Fetch and I, we came up with the idea for this camp. We decided to create this for the school district. It kind of gets students involved in different science and medical field things, so it exposes them to different career paths that they might want to go into. They get a variety of different experiences.
Because I like seeing the kids have so much fun and working together, and so like cool to see them already learning those skills, because I didn't have those skills at that age. So these kids, like, they're so driven and they really do deserve to know this kind of stuff ahead of time to make them more successful. So it feels really good to give back to the district.
I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but they're both studying nursing now. This isn't working. Vicki, can you help me? All right. Students overwhelmingly enjoyed the Biomed Camp experience. Some of the favorite activities included the blood typing, the splatter analysis, and the gel electrophoresis. They love learning about new concepts that they haven't noticed before. I got the opportunity to help guide the two students through the curriculum writing process and a little bit of providing feedback to them, and then we revised things together. So it was really neat for them to get to see some hands-on activities that the kids took away and absolutely loved. The parents also loved that the camp introduced students to current biomedical innovations. They love that it encouraged students to think outside of the box, and that they gained some real world life skills. They learned how to take blood pressure, they learned how to check one's vitals, so it opened them up to all kinds of real world opportunities. And we love that this experience was created for students by our students. They saw a problem where our middle school students weren't necessarily getting the exposure to the biomed path like we want them to be, and so they saw this problem and came up with a solution on how we can fix that problem, and our students loved it. So, thank you.
That's great.
Do you have any questions that we can take?
So I have a question.
Okay, hopefully I can answer it.
What's the plan for this summer? If it was that much of a success,
We would love to continue doing the camp this summer. So
I believe
that's
next
really
summer
the
is
plan.
on the agenda for next month.
Yeah.
Okay. Next summer's not.
We're in the planning stages for summer school right now. But yeah, with the overwhelming feedback, we're hoping that it keeps going.
Great, and then did you have some opportunity, I think you said you got some student feedback and you incorporated some feedback, so have you looked at what you're going to change?
What I was talking about with the feedback was that the students worked on this curriculum for an entire year. And so while they were working on the curriculum, they had the opportunity to gain feedback from the curriculum department, also from Mr. Brothers, and then when they presented to the IRB, and then when they presented to the showcase, they gained industry professional feedback, so that when it came time for the camp, they had a really high quality product.
That's excellent. The IRB process is so hard just in and itself, so that they have the opportunity to experience that.
Yes.
At the beginning, it is great. Board, any other questions?
I just want to add, I'm not sure if it was clear in the video, but the students actually came every day and worked with the middle school students. So it's early in the morning for our high school students in the summer, but they were very dedicated, and it made a big difference in the climate of the classrooms.
It sounds like we might have somebody on the school board up here tonight that might be interested in helping you out this summer.
Absolutely. I think what you guys did was great. I wish I was really exposed to it. As a person who wants to go into a medical field, I think being exposed to something like biomedical science would have really helped me out and presented different I guess careers that I could go into the medical field. So personally, I think it was great.
Do you think you would have had time in your schedule? Sounded like it was awful full.
Oh, this summer.
Okay. Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excellent presentation. Next on our agenda is the MSBA September Board Report.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Missouri School Boards Association's Board Report for the month of September. We thank you for the opportunity to share some news and information during a few minutes of your board meeting. We begin with a look at the search for a permanent Commissioner of Education here in Missouri. Now that the State Board of Education has a quorum and can conduct business again, it is resuming the search for a permanent Commissioner of Education, following the removal of Margie Van Dieven as Commissioner last December. The State Board of Education appointed Dr. Roger Dorson as interim commissioner at that time. At its September meeting, the State Board decided to open the application and nomination process for the job. The deadline for submitting an application or nomination is October 19th. The State Board then plans to conduct interviews and perhaps hire the permanent commissioner as early as November. Also at its September meeting, the State Board approved a state budget request for the fiscal year beginning next July that includes a $77 million increase in foundation formula funding and a $40 million increase in student transportation funding. Right now, there's about a $200 million shortfall in state funding for student transportation. Local school districts have had to assume a greater share of transportation costs over the years as state funding in that area has declined. MSBA has advocated strongly for increased state funding for student transportation. MSBA President Mike Pratt testified on school safety issues during a recent meeting in Chicago hosted by Deputy Secretary of Education Mitchell Zayas. Pratt said there's a strong need for synchronization among agencies responsible for safety. He said states, as well as federal agencies with responsibility for school safety, need an effective program to immediately message down to school districts any high-level threat potentially impacting school children. Pratt also said there's a need to have assessment tools to understand and rank the full scope of school safety risk beyond just the active shooter risk. MSBA's recommendations will be provided to the Federal Commission on School Safety. MSBA administers the Center for Education Safety, the only statewide school safety organization in the state. CES is built on the premise that school safety is best addressed through a comprehensive, community-wide approach. A number of new state laws related to public education took effect at the end of August, as is often the case following the end of a legislative session in May. And that means MSBA's policy department has been working to create new policies or update existing policies for school boards throughout the state. MSBA Associate Executive Director Kelly Hopkins oversees MSBA's policy department, and she says policy updates are designed with a goal in mind.
Obviously compliance. Obviously legal compliance is the first thing we consider. We also want to include enough information in our policies that districts will understand what the law means and what their policy says without having to call an attorney. Although they're welcome to call us if they have questions.
Hopkins says policy updates are also designed to support boards in making informed decisions and to protect school districts from making costly and damaging mistakes. The latest policy update from MSBA addresses a new virtual education law, elections, whistleblower protection, gifted education, school counseling, and other issues. All MSBA member school boards receive basic policy updates, while some 240 school boards throughout the state participate in a more customized policy service. MSBA's annual School Personnel Information Survey is now open. This survey collects information on the wages, salaries, and benefits of teachers and other school employees to help boards and administrators make fully informed personnel decisions. MSBA member districts that complete the survey and submit their salary schedules and collective bargaining agreements by November 12th this year receive free access to the data collected. Make sure your district's information is included in this year's database. Your school district staff can submit your district's information through the MSBA website. That's it for this month's edition of the MSBA Board Report. Thanks for allowing us to have some time at your board meeting, and so long from Columbia.
Excited to attend that conference next weekend. Next on our agenda is fiscal responsibility. We have a presentation from Ed Plus this evening. Dr. Mary Higgins-Harris.
Yeah, tonight I want to welcome Paul Ziegler. Paul is the Executive Director at Ed Plus. He's going to share some information about the services that are provided to us from Ed Plus. But before he starts, I want to thank Paul. Paul has ties to our district, as you might know, and he's been a great support for me and an advocate for our district. I also want to note that this is Paul's second board meeting of the day today, and it's especially notable because it's his birthday. So who doesn't want 2 board meetings for their birthday?
Thank you. And it's actually 7 on the week somehow. And what a way to spend your birthday. But thank you for a few moments tonight. I want to one of the big things, it's our 90th anniversary at Ed Plus. We're trying to get out to all 53 member districts and kind of share with what it is we do at Ed Plus. So with that, I guess this clicker works here. Who are we and who do we serve? We're 53 school districts. That's over 500 schools, 29,000 teachers, and almost 300,000 students. How do we serve that group of people? We do it through 3 things: business services, learning services, and our advocacy and communication. When we think of our business services, one of the big things we do there is cooperative purchasing. So we do that, and in that role, we like to think that we saved almost like $15 million last year for districts across the state. We do that through 2 different ways. One is a national contract where we work with 27 other states to bid with national organizations contracts that then we award locally. An example of that I think that you may be considering is our Daktronics contract. That is one that we bid with those 27 states to drive down that price as far as we can go, and then we award those contracts locally. We also do some local bidding with groups like CI Select, they're a furniture manufacturer, Dick Blick Art Supplies. There's some local folks that we're able to negotiate, and then our schools can buy and purchase through those at that discounted price. We also do P-Card. Francis Howe obviously is one of our biggest P-Card rebate receivers, almost $50,000 that we were able to rebate. The reason our P-Card works so well is we take everybody's spend amongst all those districts, and then we pool that to drive up the rebate. So last year we guaranteed all of our districts at least 120 basis points, with our largest districts are spending the most, gaining up to 125 basis points. That pool continues to grow. We've added more people to this year, but obviously with you all, you're at one of the top, and that's something to be proud of. Another thing we do through our business services is MoReap. MoReap is our clearinghouse of job and database. So everything from assistant superintendent, superintendent jobs, teachers, nurses, custodial, they all get posted on the MoReap, and that's kind of the go-to place for somebody that's looking for a job in education. We also sell that MoReap software to other states like Pennsylvania, New Mexico, Connecticut, and then they use that software to do the same thing in their states. And much like MSBA, we collect comp data, but we only do that with our 53 districts. And we collect that data so that we can have real-time data for our local region and provide that to our school districts as they make decisions. Our learning platform, last year we had over 7,300 people attend learning events. We did that through 152 professional development activities. When you think of that, that's almost 1 a day. We also did 86 customized professional development, and that's where we go into schools and work with them specifically on what their need is, or with the district on what their need is. And then we had 4 major conferences, some of which I'm sure you're familiar with. METC, Character in Action, the Support Staff Academy, and the Lions St. Louis. We delivered those learning through 4 different resources. Education Plus herself, we have our Ed Plus Learning, and that's where we do the customized PD, as well as we go out and we're already seeking information from our districts now to develop our platform for next year. So we're starting to contract with people to come in and speak, national speakers for next year now, based on what our school district's needs are. And that's where we also do our customized PD. Character Plus, you all are very familiar with. You have many schools of character, both state and national level here in Francis Howell. That is one of our resources. And they also go beyond just character education, and they are now working with restorative practices, social emotional learning, and also trauma-informed schools. We also have the St. Louis RPDC, or Regional Professional Development Center. It is the only regional professional development center in the state that's not hooked to a university. All the other ones are hooked to the Mizzou, UMKC, Southeast. You kind of get the idea. But we are actually the largest, and we're the only non-university. And then we deliver DESE's initiatives. So we have a large staff that goes out and they work with the Missouri Model Districts, the Missouri Leadership Development Series. And so that's how we deliver that, and we hold that contract from the state. METC is the Midwest Education Technology Community. We oftentimes think of the conference that goes with that. We have over 2,000 people that usually come from as many as 10 or 11 states that come in for our METC conference every year, held here in St. Charles at the Convention Center. But it's more than that conference. They offer learning opportunities throughout the year to build community, professional development through Google, Apple, and other opportunities like that, as well as provide advocacy. One of the things we're most excited about is ISTE, which is the International Society for Technology Education. We were recently named as one of their 4 affiliate partners in the world to offer ISTE certification. We actually offered the very first certification ever for ISTE this summer, and we had folks from Japan travel into St. Louis to get that certification. So again, that's something that we continue to see a growth in, and it's really an honor to be a part of that. Our network, collaboration, and communication, we have 30+ groups and networks. So that's everything from our PLNs, which are job-alike groups for nurses, superintendents, curriculum folks, to athletic directors that come to meet at Education Plus on a regular basis. We also kind of try to react to things that are going on to provide opportunities for learning. After the Parkland tragedy last year, we were able to get all of our police chiefs and sheriffs into a room with their superintendents to really kind of debrief about where do we go from here. That then led to another meeting for education leaders to talk about how do we give that student voice in a safe and protected way as student walkouts became common. And then we also provide communication, graphic design, and video support for our districts as needed. Advocacy, we develop a legislative platform here in the region. While we mirror very closely maybe what Missouri Association of School Administrators or MSBA would have, we know that sometimes a region has slightly different needs. Think back to the transfer issue years ago. That was our region that really was dealing with that, so our platform might have looked different than the rest of the state. Last year we were able to take a bus trip to the Capitol, where we took superintendents, we were able to network on the way up, meet with some of our legislators throughout the day, and then network on the way back. Also during the legislative session, I'm typically in the Capitol once a week. Try to do it on Tuesdays, just to make sure that if there's a need to testify or need to work with legislators on issues surrounding education, we have a voice from St. Louis. And then also we try to work with local advocacy groups, whether they're legislative action committees in districts, legislative breakfasts, and other things, so we try to help with that as well. So for you all, how do we touch it in some special ways beyond just the normal everyday professional development? Dr. Mary Hendricks Harris will be she's our board president-elect. So she joined our board this year and she'll be president next year. Last year you had a National School of Character Independence Elementary. Congratulations. I think they go here at the beginning of next month to get that award in Washington, D.C. as well. We facilitated a Missouri Leadership Development System cohort here in the district last year. So that was something we came to you instead of you pulling people out of your district and sending them to us. You have 12 principals participating in MLDS and 7 principals that participate as mentors. Connie Buckman leads the PD, PLN, or Job Alike group. I think they're meeting a week from Friday. And then Laura Hendricks, get that right, is vice president of the Executive Professionals Association. So again, that, our Administrative Professionals Association thing. So again, that's another way that we connect. Anybody that's been around knows CSD's been here a long time, Ed Plus has been here a long time. We had a spending problem. And I'll be honest, for many years we were spending more than we were bringing in. The year before I got there, we were actually a $200,000 deficit. I'm happy to say with the hard work of people before I got there, as well as work we did last year, we turned that around, and we actually generated some surplus earnings last year, and we're in the black about $400,000. Now our goal, of course, would be to build some reserves back to the appropriate level, and then begin to try to bring down our membership costs at some point. Lastly, I want to say we are celebrating those 90 years. I think, in my travels over the years, I've had the opportunity to be all around the state. There's not another region that supports one another the way St. Louis does. I've been in Kansas City and worked with folks. I've been in the Southeast in my time with Missouri Association of School Administrators, and we really do it right. So what we did this year for the 90th anniversary is we had a poster. This is actually a school board member from Northwest, who's a former art teacher, Sherry Talbot, that made this. And this represents the 53 school districts that are part of the Ed Plus, and they're all represented by their school logo, roughly geographically where they're at in the region. So we're going to leave this for you all, and it has the history of Ed Plus or CSD around the outside, and that is something we're delivering to all of our schools, again, to hopefully remind everybody about the strength of our region and how we cooperate together. I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Board, do you have any questions?
I'm going to leave a little bit more detailed information with Dr. Hendricks-Harris, and then she can distribute that. It gets in a little bit more detail.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Board, I'll entertain a motion to approve the purchases over $7,500 as presented. So moved. Motion made by Mrs. Lang, seconded by Mrs. Stickledge. Board, any questions? By roll call?
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries 7-0. Next on our agenda is the 2018-2019 tax rate approval. So a public hearing was conducted prior to this board meeting as required by the statute. So the 2018 tax rate is being presented to the board for approval. Bear with me as I read the motion. I would entertain a motion to set the 2018 rate by the fund as follows. Incidental, $2.11.11. Teachers, $2.01.51. Debt service, $0.67.13. Capital projects, $0.06, for a total levy of $4.85.75. End.
So moved.
Move to approve.
Second. Motion made by Mr. Lane, seconded by Mrs. Lang. Board, any concerns, questions, comments? By roll call.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries 7-0. Board, I'll entertain a motion to approve the August 2018 financial statements as presented.
Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Lang, seconded by Mrs. Walker. Board, any questions? By roll call.
Mrs. Stiglitz? Aye.
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 Motion carries 7-0. Board, I'll entertain a motion to approve the vending revenue budget for fiscal year 19 as presented.
So moved.
Second. Motion made by Mr. Hang, seconded by Mrs. Lang.
Mr. Supple, did you have anything to add to the information?
No, thank you, Mrs. Coe.
Board, any questions? By roll call?
Mr. Hain?
Aye.
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 No. Nay.
Motion carries 6-1. Board, I entertain a motion to approve the additional certified positions as presented.
So moved.
Motion made by Mrs. Stiglich, seconded by Mr. Lang. Getting confused with the Lang. Mrs. Simpkins, do you have anything to add?
No, I would just like to thank the board for allowing us to bring the additional positions forward to you for approval. As we do our staffing plan very early in our season, we will begin next year's staffing plan already this fall. And so when we created the staffing plan for 18-19, it was very early in the season, which definitely has some benefits. However, when we see class sizes change or different types of enrollments that maybe weren't expected due to some of those self-boundary changes, we have some corrections to do. So the positions that you see here will serve our special education area and will allow us to kind of move some caseloads around to better support our teachers that are working with those students.
Thank you. Board, any questions? By roll call.
Ms. Walker?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 7-0. Next on our agenda is the Transportation Services RFP review. We do plan to bid out student transportation services, and so the request for proposal document is being presented to us for review. Just want to make sure everybody is aware, there's no motion at this time. Mr. Hain.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I know we've talked about this a number of times from the dais and in work sessions. And one of the things that the board has brought up or we've talked about was the possibility, in addition to the minimum bid requirements for our district transportation, to have an option that the people that are bidding on it could give us an alternative or an addition or something other than the initial thing that possibly could save us money, something maybe we're thinking outside the box. So in addition to the original bid, that they could provide us an alternative in that. I know that's not in here, I know we've talked about this, but if you could just kind of walk us through that and so that the public and I fully understand it, if you could help me to understand why that's not included at this point in time.
Sure, Mr. Hain, I'll be glad to answer that question for you. We had a conference with our consultant who was helping with the request for proposals, and I shared the conversations that we'd had with the board in work session and at other times. We determined that in order to be fair to all the bidders, we needed to ask for apples to apples comparison. And so we're asking them to bid on the current configuration. Because we felt that, we asked them to provide a scenario that would limit the number of routes or change the parameters in terms of the number, the distance where we would pick up kids, that our existing contractor would have an unfair advantage because they know exactly how our system works and where everybody lives and how the routes are run and how all the streets are run, and they have all of the data in their routing software. It would be impractical to ask companies who've never worked in Francis Howell before to, without access to all of that data, to provide us with a reasonably accurate alternate bid. What we did include was the option to negotiate a reduction in the number of routes once we select the contractor, and we can reduce the number of routes by up to 15% without them changing the route rate. And so what that means is we'd have fewer routes, and so we'd be paying less for our transportation services, but they wouldn't be able to raise the cost per route in order to distribute the fixed costs over that smaller number. So we felt that that works to our advantage. Our current contract allows us some flexibility, but only up to 5%. And so we felt that by having the additional flexibility of that 15%, If there was another contractor that was selected, they would be able to get to know our system and then be able to make some reasonable adjustments. And we felt that we provided a way to reduce our costs without unnecessarily inflating the cost per route, which is a big driver of our transportation expenses.
And is that 15%, I mean, based on the studies and the work sessions that we've had, we probably couldn't cut more than 15% and still transport our students to school, right? From the information we've had.
I would say that that's correct, unless we made a radical change, like transporting only students who live 3.5 miles from school.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you for bringing this forward to us. And I do have out of this RFP is 52 pages long, 51 pages. What would you say the biggest difference is from our prior RFPs?
I think, well, I have to be honest and say, in the time that I've been working for the district, we haven't ever bid out transportation. We've renegotiated contracts with our current vendor. I would say, though, that I think this request for proposals has significantly more detail than what would have been included. I did provide a sample of the last RFP. That was done just before I came to the district, and so this is much more detailed and I think provides some greater specificity, which I hope will allow them to make a more informed response to us.
Thank you. Any other questions?
There was a calendar included in the RFP, so the intent is to issue the RFP Monday of next week. We've already contacted some of our potential bidders to let them know that it's going to be available. So that'll be available beginning Monday of next week. Early in October, they have an opportunity to have a meeting with the district, either in person or virtually, to meet with us, a pre-bid meeting. Then they have to submit questions, and by the middle of October, they need to have their responses to us. We will evaluate them after we've received them. Our goal is to bring a recommendation to the board at the November 15th board meeting.
I think she's okay. Mrs. Walker, did you have a question?
Yeah, I can barely hear. Are we not looking at changing and bringing busing in-house? Is that just, we're not going to look at it?
It is a possibility that exists for us. So I think Dr. Hendricks-Harris and I have already had some meetings with other districts who have made that transition. We are kind of working on that as a possible scenario. We do have a fairly short time framework, which is why a decision on November 15th, which could be to reject all of the proposals that are submitted and direct us to do something different, would be important, because if we're going to start a transportation system that we run internally, we need some lead time just to order equipment and software and get people trained and hired. Not impossible, tight time framework, but we'll take first a look at what proposals we receive. And as I said, Dr. Hendricks-Harris and I have already had some extended conversations about not only the mechanics, but the pros and cons of moving to an in-house delivery system.
We've been informally talking about different options, so we do think our RFP is a good first step. We want to see what we get back. I know that we have had some issues with First Student this year, and that certainly will play into future decision making, but we want to look at the RFP, see what options we have in regards to moving forward with First Student or other bus companies, and And then I think when we talked with other districts, they definitely looked at RFPs prior to considering bringing in-house. So I think we want to see what we get back and the costs that will be outlined in the RFPs in order to give us a starting point for our conversation about bringing in internally, potentially.
And I do want to share, one of the conversations that we've had is that the nature of the business is such that there's going to be an opportunity for disruptions, some of which can be upsetting to people. So whether it's an in-house operation or outsourced, buses are going to break down, bus drivers are going to get sick, there are going to be too many scheduled events that conflict with our regular evening routes. Those problems don't go away, it's just the management of them. So I don't want to set the bar too high for people's expectations. That an in-house operation would be free from some of the problems that we currently experience. I think management might take a little bit different approach to solving those problems, but the nature of the business is you have a workforce that's a little bit more transient than what we're accustomed to, and you have 160 buses driving a couple million miles a year. Something's going to break down at some time. So just so you know that we're still going to have problems. We just may solve them a little bit differently.
Thank you.
Board, any other questions at this time? Excited to get that process moving. Next on our agenda is policy review first reading. Please make sure you are taking a look at those policies. Superintendent comments.
Yeah, I think most of you have heard, but I want to share one more time. Our own Shelley Parks from Francis Hall North was selected as the Missouri State Teacher of the Year by Destiny. We had a great surprise assembly, and Commissioner Dr. Roger Dorson was on hand to present the award. Shelley will have a great opportunity to travel the state, sharing her knowledge and learning best practices to bring back to Francis Hall as well. She's a great champion of students and a great representative of our district. Earlier this month, we had our first round of new strategic plan committees, including several advisory committees. The feedback from committee members has been very positive, and we're excited about the energy that has been infused to the process. We'll begin to report out by goal next month, so expect that on the agenda. Our first senior PALS event of the year was the high school marching band preview at Francis Hall High School. We had a great turnout. I think it was one of our largest yet, and lots of positive feedback. During that time, Sean Irwin shared the community service efforts performed by the teams and clubs, and band student Alyssa Miller talked about how extracurricular activities like band help strengthen a student's bond with their school. Our next PALS event will be the Iron Chef competition in November. We're excited to have them there for that. After watching news coverage of the volcano of fire eruption in Guatemala, a third grader at Warren Elementary felt the need to do something to help. Dominic Rodriguez has dual citizenship in both the United States and Guatemala, and his family members that live nearby and were affected by the eruption received a large donation of used firefighting equipment from the LSL Fire Department that will go directly to Guatemalan firefighters. Aaron Pearson, I know some of you know him, he's a teacher at Ryan Middle School, has been nominated for the 2018-19 Life Changer of the Year Award. A Spectra teacher who works with students in the district's gifted program, Pearson was nominated by students for his continuing support and for creating a comfortable and stimulating classroom environment. On Friday, October 5th, the Francis Hall School District Alumni Association and Education Foundation will host Howl of a Good Time Trivia Night. Bring your thinking cap, wear your school spirit or jersey, and enjoy a great time while we help to raise money for a good cause. Proceeds will benefit the Early Childhood Education Scholarships and the foundation. Francis Hall School District, in partnership with the Nilo Tech E-Cycling, will be hosting a community-wide appliance and electronics recycling event on Saturday, October 6th from 9 to 1 at the Burr Center. And just a few things. In the coming weeks, Executive Cabinet will begin our after-school chats. And while we had to keep students in for recess because of the heat index today, tomorrow we will begin to discuss snow day protocols. I know everyone's looking forward to MSBA, where there will be 2 presentations from Francis Hall School District, and we will have the opportunity to hear Shelley Parks address school boards across the state.
Thank you very much. Very exciting stuff happening. Next on our agenda is Board of Education comments. Ms. Diggler?
Last month, we got a donation from the St. Charles Ambulance District with an AED, and within a week of getting that, we had another reason why to use it. I just want everybody to understand that AEDs do save lives. So I want to make sure that you let everybody know in the St. Ambulance District that we really appreciated it.
Great, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
I have some comments that I wanted to share. I had the opportunity to travel to France for vacation this year. And while I was there, I stayed in a home with a friend of mine who had 2 sons that are currently in their public school system. And just to share, for knowledge purposes, students there go to school from about 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. They on average have at least 2 hours worth of homework. They do not have any school activities. They do not have sports. They do not have clubs. They do not have a stage. They do not have a sport field. They only have class. And so as I talked with, oh, and by the way, no dances. So no homecoming, no proms. They literally only go to school for knowledge, not community, not social service, not camaraderie. So with speaking with these 2 young men, it was just interesting to learn about their school experience and share with them how we handle a public school here in the United States. So just an opportunity to share that cultural exchange. Receipt, do you have anything that you would like to say this evening?
Nothing really to mind.
Dr. Nella's gone, if you'd like to say anything.
He's fantastic.
He's awesome.
Yes.
Well, I want to thank you for being with us here this evening. Excited about the progress that you have made in your high school. So great work, keep it up. And if you have any comments or questions that you think about later, feel free to reach out to us.
Thank you.
For next on our agenda is Board of Education requests. Do we have any requests at this time? Okay. Let's take a look at our upcoming meetings. Our next meeting is October 11th. Any additions or corrections, changes?
We'll have an academic update, not necessarily the workshop with the update.
Okay. Anything else at this time? Okay. Or let's take a look at our next meeting, November 15th.
Mrs. Coe,
Yes, Mr. Supple.
I am going to be bringing a refunding of some outstanding bonds to the board. We have an opportunity to refund a little over $6 million worth of bonds and save some money by doing that. So it's the last little set that we have of the outstanding bonds that are callable or able to be refunded. So we'll be bringing that to the board November 15th.
Great, thank you. Will we also have the transportation RFP at that meeting?
Yes.
Any other changes for that meeting? Board, as you know, we did not finish our closed session, so I would entertain a motion to recess to closed session.
So moved.
Second. Motion made by Mrs. Walker, seconded by Mrs. Lane. By roll call.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 7-0. We meet in closed session in 5 minutes. Thank you.